On the occasion of the 80th anniversary of Russia's victory in the Great Patriotic War, so yesterday you attended the parade on Red Square. What did you take away from that experience? In your opinion, how grand were the celebrations? Perhaps which pieces of equipment impressed you the most?
All right, thank you very much. As you mentioned, the context here is indeed, and quite certainly, the celebration of Russia's victory in the Great Patriotic War, as it is commonly called, which, of course, is a truly significant historical event. We were very impressed by the parade, especially because it began with the entire motorized section featuring vehicles, starting with the legendary T-34 tank that contributed to the victory, all the way up to today's modern vehicles like the T-90s, and of course, other types of missiles that have been developed. It made a strong impression on us, taught us many lessons, and allowed us to see how Russia has evolved technologically in military terms from that great war up to the present day.
All right, Mr. President, and why was it important for you to accept President Putin's invitation and join Russia in these celebrations?
It's important to me for several reasons. First of all, because it's an invitation, from a friendly country. Today, Russia and Burkina Faso are working closely together. Our cooperation is quite strategic, which means we need to come and take part alongside the Russian people. Secondly, in that same war, our ancestors also contributed to the liberation of Europe, to the fight against Nazism, which means that we therefore share a common history in the celebration of this victory. That's very important. And another thing is that today, Russia and Burkina Faso are fighting the same battle. We have a world that I would describe as unilateral, and we want a multipolar world. We want a world that is free, independent, a world of peace where nations do not dictate to other nations what they should do and how they should be. So Russia is actively engaged in this struggle, which is also a struggle for denazification, if I may say so. And so we too are engaged in this same kind of struggle against imperialism, which wants to enslave us, which wants to keep us in bondage. So we share the same perspectives. So it was very symbolic for us to come and take part alongside the Russian people in this celebration.
In particular, the Soviet people made a major contribution to defeating Nazism. And the Burkinabe people, as you rightly say, are now making efforts to fight and eradicate terrorism. Do you see similarities between our two peoples, and how do these similarities manifest themselves more concretely?
Yes. I have learned many lessons from this celebration. There are many similarities in the struggle we are currently waging. Look at the Soviet people who sacrificed nearly 27 million lives to achieve this victory. At one point, they could have said enough, signed an armistice, and given up. But it was their courage, tenacity, and resilience that made them continue the fight, and in the end, they won. Burkina Faso has been fighting against terrorism for 10 years now. It's not that there haven't been any deaths. There have been many deaths from that time until today, but we do not give up because we know that we will achieve victory, and we continue this fight. So there is this mindset that unites us, and that's also what is very interesting in these moments.
And how do you analyze the influence of the Soviet victory in the Second World War on the process of decolonization in Africa? What would have happened, if we can try to imagine, to Africa if Nazism had won?
It contributed a lot, I can say. Now, if Nazism had won, I can't really imagine, but I can try. You know, people did not respect black people. Even today, it still goes on. Black people have always been labeled as subhuman. Some even saw us as animals, in fact. You know the stories of colonization, of slavery. Black people were tortured, displayed in cages like wild animals in Europe and all that. Black people were castrated to prevent them from even having offspring. Black people were treated as less than animals. You know that in Congo, they considered cardboard to be more valuable than black skin. They preferred to dry rubber on black people's skin rather than pay for cardboard to dry the rubber. Black people have suffered greatly. So, slavery for centuries and centuries, colonization, and this war, you see, they came and took our ancestors without their consent, sent them to the slaughterhouse on the front lines. And when they returned, as you know what happened in Senegal, when they tried to claim their money, they were killed. In other words, they do not consider black people. And yet they went to fight alongside so-called allies who treated them like that. But imagine if Nazism had won, it would have been a disaster. That's why I say it was a fight that had to be fought. It was utter madness in the world. It was a fight that had to be fought, and Africa took part. And today we can say thank you, because the people who made the greatest sacrifice were the Soviet people. No one lost as many men, no one experienced as much destruction during the war as the Soviet people. So we are grateful, and I think it was necessary for the world to be as it is today, and for Africa to be able to hope to move forward as well.
Thank you very much for your answer. Mr. President, you recently declared that Burkina Faso will be the graveyard of terrorism.
Yes?
Are you setting concrete deadlines to completely defeat it? And how do you see Russia's future assistance regarding this, one of the main pillars of the Russia-Burkina Faso partnership?
I said that because in Burkina Faso we are working so that today there are many criminals that they recruit to come and fight in Burkina Faso. This is not terrorism, I don't know how to describe it. It's criminality. These are bandits who have been armed by the imperialists to destabilize us, to keep us in a state of perpetual war, and to exploit us. And so, as I said, we are working to make Burkina Faso the graveyard of terrorism. When someone is recruited to come and fight in Burkina, it should be so that they would rather commit suicide. And that will happen because they equip them, they train them, and they give them technology, these criminals, but we are constantly adapting. Right now, we are in a rather unique phase. They have acquired new technologies, new combat techniques and everything, thanks to the support of those imperialists. Now that we have studied the situation, and we are going to respond to all of this immediately. So you will see, terrorism will come to an end. I don't want to set a deadline, but terrorism will end, and very soon, as quickly as we can. And from Russia, all we are really asking for is mainly intellectual support, that's it. Help us with intellectual training for our military industry, which we need to develop, and help train young people in everything we can develop to face this war. That's the part that interests us the most.
Mm-hmm. And more specifically, what equipment or perhaps what kind of gear interests you the most?
First of all, I want to say thank you, because Russia is one of those rare countries in the world that has provided us with military equipment to help us fight this war. So that's significant. Apart from Russia and China, there is no one, or even worse. Elsewhere, even when we want to pay, they refuse to sell to us. But now they have understood that we are at war. Russia is also conducting its special operation. We know that it's not easy, but even so, if they have managed to provide equipment and come to give it to Burkina Faso, I think that's already very important. But as I said, Russia is also helping to train us. For everything we purchase, Russian soldiers train Burkinabe soldiers on how to use this equipment and all that. But we want to continue developing our own military industry with the support of Russia, which is far ahead of the rest of the world, I would say, when it comes to weaponry. So we need to have this close collaboration so that we can make progress in our war.
Thank you very much. So this past year has been marked by major changes for the Sahel and for each of the AES countries in particular, such as, for example, the definitive break with ECOWAS, and also the adoption of their own symbols, like the common flag. In this context, how would you describe Burkina Faso before and after? And how do you assess the alliance of Sahel states as a format for regional cooperation? Are there any plans for expansion, perhaps?
Yes. To understand the AES today, you just have to look at the African youth. I think that African youth are hopeful that this is a model of unity. And for us, the leaders of the AES, it puts pressure on us. We have to succeed because Africa now needs to unite. We were in an organization that was supposed to be a relationship based on solidarity, cooperation, mutual assistance, and all that. But you can't be in an organization where you call each other brothers and then at some point you cut off the electricity so that patients die in hospitals and the economy comes to a halt. They close the banks so you can't access anything. Your transfers to buy basic necessities, medicine and so on, they've blocked that for some Sahelian peoples. They even formed an army to come and fight Sahelian peoples while terrorism has been raging for decades and they haven't been able to send a single soldier to help fight it. These are not brothers. We shouldn't fool ourselves. And it's not the people, it's the leaders. Otherwise, when you look at the people, even in these ECOWAS countries and so on, the people support and understand the momentum of the AES. So that encourages us to organize ourselves to be a model so that in the future it can spread. That's it. But to expand, we need to establish strong foundations, and that's what we are currently doing. So that's basically what led us to withdraw and to organize ourselves in order to relaunch.
Mm-hmm. Mr. President, for many people in Africa, you are more than just the president of a country. In fact, you are seen as the embodiment of the new Pan-Africanism. Why does Africa today in particular need, if I may say so, a new Thomas Sankara? How does it feel actually to take on all this responsibility at only 37 years old?
Age isn't important, but it is pressure, I can say that. It's pressure. You shouldn't let it go to your head or become delusional about greatness. It's pressure. For me, it's a message that the youth are sending me, and it puts even more pressure on me. If I could sleep 2 hours, I reduce my sleep time to 1 hour, and if you don't have to sleep, you have to sleep more. Because they've seen something surely that we're doing, and in their view, it could allow Africa to get out of this situation. And for us, it encourages us, it remotivates us to keep fighting. That's why I say it's pressure. It's a very heavy responsibility. And I can promise that all we can do is not betray and to continue on our path of Pan-African struggle. We hope that it can inspire all African youth and that the Pan-Africanism we so deeply wish for can become a reality. Because Africa has suffered a lot. It's time for us to unite, to work, and to develop. Just as Africans go elsewhere to see the world and everything it has to offer. In Africa, it's possible. It's possible. So this is our mission, and we are going to take responsibility for it.
Mr. President, more and more African countries are asserting their sovereignty and demanding the withdrawal of Western troops from their soil. Recently, for example, Chad, Senegal, and Côte d'Ivoire have made similar requests. In your opinion, where did the West go wrong in its relations with the African continent?
Well, what I know is our own situation. We were at war, we lived with Western troops and all that. We saw and we decided to part ways with those troops because it did not fit with the struggle. On the contrary, it made the problem worse. As for the other countries that separated, I can't comment because they made their own decisions to separate. But afterwards, President Macron said that he was the one who told them to find a solution and all that. I can't get into that debate, only they know the truth. But one thing is certain, you can't talk about sovereignty while having a foreign army on your soil telling you what to do. The economy, education, all aspects of a country's development are based on the military. So every country should develop its own army, be sovereign and independent. And that's exactly what we are doing. When I look at the case of Burkina, these foreign armies were present and that contributed to the weakening of the Burkinabe army. There were no more recruitments. They were the ones who decided how many people could be recruited. There was more weaponry, equipment, and everything. Even back in 1988 under Sankara, we were better equipped than, well, 10 or 20 years later. And in the end, terrorism entered the country. When terrorism arrived, we didn't have an army. We're still suffering from it today. It's in the midst of war that we're trying to build an army. So it's normal that it takes some time. We're suffering, but we have to create an army. And when we come out of this war, we must come out stronger. That's what I'm saying. When I look at the statistics of the Soviet army, the number of men they lost, but when the war was over, they emerged much stronger. And today, no army has the equipment that the Russian army has. So we too must learn from our war. When we come out of this war, we must be very strong. Sovereignty begins with the army. Once you have a strong army, all the other sectors can easily develop. That's what I can say. That's what led Burkina, in any case, to part ways with those armies.
All right. Another topic that remains important is the Ukrainian issue. Russia has declared itself ready to negotiate without any preconditions, while Ukraine is constantly imposing constraints. Moreover, Kiev supports terrorists in the Sahel. In your opinion, who does not want peace for our two countries?
I think that even before now, it was the Turkish President Erdogan who managed to create a framework for dialogue. I believe the two presidents met at that time. That was only the beginning of the operation. All of us hoped that it would lead somewhere, that the weapons would fall silent, and that everyone would return to good intentions. But it was the Westerners who came and told the Ukrainian president not to accept. We followed all of that, and in the end, what did it lead to? But I think all of this is part of manipulation. I think they were manipulated. Otherwise, the Ukrainian and Russian peoples were part of the Soviet Union. They are brothers. How is it that hatred and Russophobia could be cultivated within this population? The war didn't start in 2022. It started in 2014. That's also a reality that many people perhaps don't know or that people refuse to talk about. It was in 2014 that the war began. Today people seem surprised and maybe are putting all the blame on Russia and so on. But back in 2014, when Russian-speaking civilians were being bombed, there are still images of that. People were locked inside houses and burned. There are images that still exist, but something should have been done all this time. They were manipulated, and today that's the reality. You see, all the aid that was given is not really aid. They were told to hand over their minerals. In reality, Ukraine no longer belongs to the Ukrainians. They were manipulated, and now they're the losers. All sectors will be managed by those who led them into this war. The hope was to weaken Russia, but Russia will come out of this war even stronger. So I think they need to understand this and come back to their senses in order to negotiate and achieve peace. Because they have declared that they support the terrorists. You all followed that. We can also see it on the ground that they are indeed supporting the terrorists. This is not a good war. I think they are completely mistaken. They need to come back to their senses. In any case, they can support them, but we will fight them and we will win. So if they still haven't understood by now that this whole maneuver was meant to bring them down and seize their critical minerals, they can keep waging war. So that's what I can say about the situation. Every people must understand that they need to avoid being manipulated and getting into a very complicated situation. That's more or less what I can say.
Thank you very much for that answer. Mr. President, what do you think of the Sputnik news agency and its role in the African media landscape? What makes its content appealing to African audiences? And in your opinion, what is the main difference with mainstream media?
The press is very important. Communication, you know that it's through the press that people's minds are shaped. So you already play a very important role by bringing out a part of the truth about history and the present. You must continue in this direction to awaken people's awareness. Because you see, it's all this Western press and all that which have contributed to putting the African people's consciousness to sleep. It's their narrative that gets through and all that. And we've been able to realize that often they invent big lies just to divide people, to allow their policies to operate and do whatever they want to prepare the ground and everything. So you need to do the opposite of what they do. That is, contribute to awakening people's awareness, and you have an important role to play, especially in Africa itself, so that Africans understand their own history, wake up, and stop believing the lies of those Western media outlets. And you see, when it doesn't suit them, when we tell them the truth, they shut down the media. But here, when a media outlet is shut down, it becomes a huge issue. And what's unfortunate is to see even Africans supporting this. Over there, they shut down media outlets whenever they want, whenever it doesn't please them. Or those same people don't say a word. But when we shut down media outlets, you see so-called intellectual Africans on TV panels. We don't know what they've taken, but it's dangerous. So you have a very important role to play, as do all the media, in awakening the consciousness of Africans. There you go. I said that we are here so that young people wake up. We're not here with the intention of looting or anything like that. We want to build Africa. And if young people aren't awakened, they'll be lulled to sleep. We have our praises sung by these Western media, telling us everything is fine, everything is fine. But no, that's not true. We want that when things aren't going well, people know that things aren't going well. That's it, and that others can take over. But when they also lie and say things aren't going well, we'll prove the opposite. So keep communicating and raising awareness in Africa. That's it.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, following the statements made by the AFRICOM commander before the US Senate, your government responded firmly, denouncing unfounded accusations regarding Burkina Faso's sovereign choices. What do you say to those, especially in Washington, who continue to question the legitimacy of your current partnerships, particularly with Russia? And how do you intend to defend the image of Burkina Faso on the international stage in the face of this kind of rhetoric?
In any case, we are free to form relationships with whomever we choose. That is what independence means. So on this point, they can continue to think whatever they want. As for us, we will go wherever we want, as long as this partnership can, in any case, be mutually beneficial for both parties. Regarding these remarks, as you mentioned, we have protested through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's one thing. But I honestly and genuinely don't really know what exactly happened with that general. There is still a continuing and problematic issue. And I would perhaps very much like him to openly admit his mistake if he was sent, for him to truly understand, as I see it, that this was not, in fact, from my perspective, the right mission. If he was misled, he should say so publicly, or otherwise admit before the Senate that he was mistaken. Or also, if it was done with bad intentions, then we will confront him as we should, because everything he said is a lie. And it's really shameful to see an adult lie, to see an adult, a general officer of a great army, lie. This is very serious. First of all, he talked about Burkina's gold being used for what? For us to protect ourselves and all that. First is Burkina's gold. It's not his gold. That's the first thing. What business is it of his? It's none of his business. It's Burkina's gold. It doesn't concern him. Second, he's lying, because Burkina never had any gold reserves until we came. We're the ones who started setting aside gold in the treasury of Burkina Faso. Otherwise, there wasn't a single gram of gold reserves in Burkina. So that means he's a liar, again. And another thing, when he says that we use it to protect ourselves and all that, we're free. If the people have decided that we should govern them, we have a duty to protect ourselves. So we are free. What business is it of his? And the part that hurt me the most, not because he's a general or because he's American or anything like that, but because he's black. And it really hurts to see a black man being used to fight against another black man. And this didn't start just now. It has to stop. You see, it's very dangerous. Even Libya, who destroyed Libya? Once again, they used a black man. In movies, back in the day in America, black people always played the villain. But we told ourselves, it's just in the movies. But why do black people have to keep playing the bad guy? I think that if he heard this interview, he should look at himself in the mirror, feel ashamed, come out and say, well, I was given a false report, I regret it. He needs to say it publicly. If it was a false report, then it was made, because it's possible. It's possible that he was given a false report, that he should come out with it, because as you saw, when I take another neighbor, again, as I say among us, black, the Ivorian Minister of Defense, who goes around, travels to Turkey, meets the Turkish Minister of Defense and tells him that they won't sell us weapons. You see how much that hurts. When it's a black person who behaves like that, it really hurts. Did we make a false report? Let him come out and deny it. If he was sent to create a problem in Burkina, as they usually do, well, we will get ready. We will be waiting for them, because this has to stop now. The black race should not be used to fight against black people. Every time it's the same thing. It's always the same. And that's what we deplore. And that really hurt us to see that it was a black man making those statements. It's true that they may try to express their regret through various channels. They're trying to make up for it. But now, since it was said publicly, it needs to be corrected publicly. That's how we are. We're no longer engaging in diplomatic hypocrisy, as people like to say. To say things loudly and clearly and then come behind the scenes and say, no, we're sorry, we didn't mean it, that doesn't work. It needs to be said publicly. So I urge them to make amends, to say it publicly, because African youth have understood. Black youth all over the world have understood. This kind of manipulation doesn't work anymore. That's how it's always been, using false pretexts in hopes of achieving other goals. It doesn't work anymore, so it's unfortunate, but Burkina Faso remains true to its path. We will continue to develop ourselves. He forgot to mention everything we are doing for Burkina Faso. What we are doing, no previous regime has accomplished. That's it, the socio-economic development of Burkina Faso. Who has done that? Look, we are building many health centers, equipping them with medical devices for examinations, and lowering the costs of medical tests. Which regime has done the same? No one. We are taking action in agriculture, plowing farmers' fields for free, our production has increased, and so on. Who has done it? No one. The army, we are in the process of creating a new army. The Burkinabe army has never been as well staffed and equipped as it is now. Who has done that? No regime. When it comes to jobs, no regime has created as many jobs as we have. Industrialization, maybe that's what bothers them, what they want to stop, and so they make up lies. In any case, I invite them to reconsider their position. That's all I can say. It's a big lie, and it's unfortunate.